Hello and welcome to another week of fantasy football previews. Today we're going to be ranking our top 12 running backs for the 2019 fantasy season. Let's waste no time. Here's number 12. At number 12 is a guy that may have burned a lot of you fantasy owners last year, but he still finished as the RB10 on the season, and that's David Johnson, the Arizona Cardinals running back. He still finished as a top 10 fantasy running back over the full course of the season, but he did struggle through large portions of the year and wasn't as proficient game to game as one would hope from a first-round draft pick. Let's just go all the way back to the beginning with DJ. Go DJ, that's my DJ in 2015. He popped up on the scene, didn't receive 8 carries or start a game until week 13, still finished as the running back 11 on the year. The next season in 2016, he took the NFL by storm. He was the best running back that year, topping all running backs in fantasy points, and no running back has had as good a season in terms of fantasy points since David Johnson in 2016. Even Gurley's last 2 seasons don't match what DJ did in 2016. Of course, then he broke his wrist and missed all of last year, and the offense was very poor this year. So DJ definitely has the potential to be a big-time weapon in fantasy. The reason he's not higher, though, is I still don't trust the offense. Cliff Kingsbury is coming from the Big 12. He wasn't successful there. This is his first year as the head coach. And also, David Johnson only scored more than 13 fantasy points 5 times this year. But still, I like DJ as an RB1. At number 11 is a guy that just burst onto the scene. He was the third-string running back before a couple incidents in November and December put him on the map big time, and that is Damien Williams, the Kansas City running back. After Kareem Hunt's suspension and incident, then it started with Spencer Ware. He was the starting running back. Then he goes down in the Baltimore game. Starting with that Baltimore game when Spencer Ware got injured week 14, including the playoffs, Damien Williams has 7 touchdowns in those 5 games. He has been a beast because the offense is just so explosive. All you have to do is be a part of that Kansas City offense and get some touches, and you have a chance to post monster points every single week. That's why I like Damien Williams at 11. And the main reason he became part of this consideration was he signed a 2-year contract extension going into week 17, 2 years, $8 million. Only him and rookie Darrell Williams are on the books for Kansas City running backs for next season. Charcandrick West will be a free agent. Spencer Ware will be a free agent. So that's the reason he actually moved up into this list, is because the Chiefs have shown over the next 2 years they want Damien Williams to be a part of their offense. And whoever the running back is in this Kansas City offense will be an RB1 on the season next year. I'm predicting it's Damien Williams. The reason he's not higher, he just doesn't have the talent as some of these other players on this list. He's an undrafted free agent, whereas most of these guys coming up are a first, second, or third round draft pick in the NFL, showing their team's priority on that player. And there's just a lot of mouths to feed in Kansas City. He's not the focal point, not even the second option. It's even arguable whether he's the third option. But that offense has enough to go around to get Damien Williams to be my RB11 for 2019. Now this next guy, he is a major focal point of his offense, and that's Joe Mixon for the Cincinnati Bengals, a former second-round pick. Mixon continues to elevate his game in the NFL. He will be going into his 3rd season in the league in 2019, and he's coming off his best year. He finished 4th in the NFL in rushing yards, and he has a very similar running style to Le'Veon Bell, shows patience in the hole. He's explosive once he's able to break one. I like Mixon a lot, but the reason he's not higher is because the Bengals defense is terrible. I still feel like they're going to be in rebuilding mode next year, and that's going to force them to abandon the run in a lot of games. The Bengals were in the bottom 8 in running percentage this season, and they'll probably be close to that next year because I don't see the Bengals making a big leap in terms of their whole entire team. It won't give Mixon enough touches to go any higher than RB10. At number 9 is a guy that was in that same draft class with Joe Mixon, just 3 rounds later, and that's Aaron Jones, the Green Bay Packers running back. Jones was a monster whenever he was on the field this year. He led the NFL in yards per carry, showing explosiveness every time he touched the ball. But one of the reasons why he wasn't a monster in fantasy was because McCarthy never let him become a true bell cow running back or gave him that opportunity. And that's one of the reasons I think McCarthy was chased out of town by Green Bay. He never saw what Jones could do, or at least he never acted like he knew what Jones could do. He never gave him the full workload. Anybody coming into that offense would be foolish not to make Jones a priority. He only started 12 games, still finished a top 23 running back in fantasy this year, and that was only on the 33 most touches. So he didn't get the opportunities, but whenever he did, he made the most of them. The reason Aaron Jones isn't higher is because he does have injury concern. Ended the season with a lower leg injury, the second straight year in 2 seasons as a pro to suffer a lower leg injury. This one won't inhibit him in the future, but you don't like to see your running backs piling up injury problems. And he does have that backfield competition we touched on. The new offense should be wise to let most of it go through Jones, but we still have to wait and see. That's why Aaron Jones comes in at number 9. Just before Week 7, the Cleveland Browns made a questionable roster move, which we're not really surprised to see from that organization. But this one really paid off, and that was shipping out Carlos Hyde and letting Nick Chubb be the starting running back. Since he took over from Week 7 onward, he averaged 14.5 fantasy points per game, which over the full course of the year would have put him at the RB6 on the season. The Cleveland Browns drafted both Mayfield and Chubb early on in this past NFL draft. Mayfield, obviously first overall, Nick Chubb, early second round. So they want those two guys to be the ones leading their backfield going forward for the long term. And that's an exciting thought because the offense did look a lot better later on in the season once both of those two became familiar with the system. The only reason Nick Chubb isn't higher is because these 7 guys ahead of him I've seen do it over the full course of the season and trust him just a little bit more than I do Nick Chubb at this point. Coming in at number 7 is a player that had one of the most impressive performances of any running back in the 2018 season, and that is Christian McCaffrey. He was 3rd in fantasy points this year. He had over 1,000 rushing yards, and he led the NFL in terms of running backs in receiving yards. He was doing it all for the Carolina Panthers this past season, and McCaffrey was one of the most pleasant surprises in the NFL this year. Now, the reason he's not any higher than 7 is because in none of my leagues do you get points for what a player did last year. And I think McCaffrey is a classic case of chasing points if you go any higher than 7 with him. He was 3rd amongst all running backs in touches. I just feel like he's not going to go any higher than what he did. That was his ceiling, and which is not a bad ceiling to be the 3rd best running back in terms of fantasy last year. But I'm not going to reach for him at that ceiling. I like McCaffrey at 7. Now getting into the top half of this list, at number 6, we have Melvin Gordon, who actually finished as the RB6 this past season, but he only played in 12 games. Melvin Gordon was a beast this season. He scored over 15 fantasy points in 75% of his outings. The Chargers are an explosive offense, and they love using Melvin Gordon in the red zone and at the goal line. He was able to rack up 10 rushing touchdowns this season, only one of 6 backs to do so. And he also has a total of 18 rushing touchdowns over the course of the last 2 seasons. Now, the reason Melvin Gordon isn't higher is because he does lose backfield touches to Austin Eckler, especially in passing situations. And while Melvin's yards per carry was better this season, his career average over 4 seasons is only at a 4.0. Amongst the 5 other running backs higher than him, their lowest is a 4.3. Interestingly enough, the guy with the lowest yards per carry of these top 5 at 4.3 comes in at number 5, and that's Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell has been so impressive throughout his NFL career so far. In 3 of 4 seasons, he has finished as a top 5 running back, not counting this holdout year. The one year he did not was when he ended his season after week 6 with a season-ending knee injury. Over the course of his career, as long as Le'Veon Bell plays the majority of the games, he has been a top-tier RB1, and that has a lot to do with his receiving capabilities. He's such a dual threat out of the backfield. Now, the reason he's not higher is because there's just so many question marks surrounding Le'Veon Bell right now. The Steelers could transition tag him or come to terms on a long-term deal, but either of those options seem unlikely. he'll most likely be going to a new team. And depending on the landing spot, he could move up or down on this list. But one thing I know is that Le'Veon Bell is a great runner, and regardless of where he goes, I expect a lot of output from Bell in the next season. At number 4 is another back that's still playing this weekend, and that's Alvin Kamara. Kamara is such a fun player to watch. He finished 4th amongst all running backs in fantasy points this year, and that was with Mark Ingram in the backfield. He was only 16th in rushing attempts and made the most of every single one of his touches yet again this season. Ingram is going into free agency this year, and I don't expect him to re-sign with New Orleans, meaning the majority of this backfield and the majority of Ingram's touches could go to Kamara for next season. And when Ingram was out with suspension in the first 4 games this year, Kamara averaged a ridiculous 25 fantasy points per game. His ceiling is incredible if he gets a big workload. Now, the reason he's not higher is because of that durability. Sean Payton has been wise to limit Kamara's touches in the regular season, keeping him fresh for playoff runs. He's not as big a back as some of these other guys, so whether he'd be able to withstand the amount of touches and beatings that these guys take is certainly up for debate, and that's one of the reasons Sean Payton is not letting Kamara get 20-plus carries game in and game out. He did have 74 more touches this season compared to his rookie season, so that is still increasing, which is a great sign for Kamara, but I never see him getting the workload as these 3 guys ahead of him, and that's why I have Kamara at 4. Fantasy football is all about opportunity, and each of these next 3 guys on the list were in the top 4 in the NFL in touches this past season. The other person on that list being Christian McCaffrey, who we already touched on. This player, number 3, led the NFL in touches last season, and that's Ezekiel Elliott. He has been the rushing champ in 2 of his first 3 years in the league, including this year, rushing for over 1,400 yards. The one season he wasn't the rushing champ is when he had to miss 6 games through suspension and still finish as a top 10 RB. This guy is the model of consistency and a great running back. Anybody would be happy to have him on their team. The only reason he's not higher at this point, it's getting down to splitting hairs, but Ezekiel Elliott is not as prolific catching the ball out of the backfield as the top 2 guys, and that's why I have him at 3. At number 2 is the rookie sensation, Saquon Barkley. What's there not to say about this guy? He was 2nd in rushing yards, 3rd in touchdowns, and that's being part of a poor offense. He finished 2nd amongst all running backs in fantasy points in only his first season as a pro. It doesn't take much film study to see the talent that Saquon Barkley has. He's going to be a major player in the league for some time to come. The only reason I don't have him at number 1 is just because I don't trust his offense as much, and he doesn't have a reliable quarterback right now that can get him the opportunities and the goal line touches that I think he would need to overtake this guy at number 1. Coming in at number 1, a big surprise to all of you, I'm sure, it's Todd Gurley, the Rams running back. He should be the first player off the board in all redrafts next season, unless you really like Saquon Barkley. I get his upside, but Gurley has the safest floor. In 2 seasons under McVay, he has topped all running backs in back-to-back years, being the highest scorer at that position. He has 40 touchdowns in those 2 years. Unless you're a Giants fan, don't overthink this at number 1. Take Todd Gurley. So there you have it, folks. That's my top 12 running backs from number 1 all the way down to number 12. Those are all great runners, but that's the order I would like them for the 2019 season. Once again, let me know who you like more, who you like less, who I left off the list that should be on there. And while you're doing that, I'll be compiling my wide receivers rankings, so stay tuned for that one.